Transformative mediation was defined when Bush and Folger wrote The Promise of Mediation in 1994. And as they describe it in that book, the threads of this philosophy and this approach predated them, and there are certainly commonalities with transformative mediation and some ancient conflict management techniques. So, but the term transformative mediation was really became officially the term for this approach in 1994. It then became more formalized, and some more clearly defined techniques were articulated as Bush and Folger rolled out the big program that the U.S. Postal Service adopted. The redress program is the acronym they use for their employment discrimination claims, where transformative mediation is required, and that was started in around 1996. And so Bush and Folger and some other members of their think tank created the curriculum, and so they came out with a new edition of their book in 2004, which articulated, kind of described what had happened in the previous 10 years of the evolution of the model. And so, I practice transformative mediation in a way that I believe is consistent with what Bush and Folger are talking about. But in a larger sense, the philosophy that they are applying to mediation has been called a relational worldview, as opposed to an individualistic worldview. And that's another way that one might distinguish transformative mediation from other approaches to mediation. Even the problem-solving, interest-based, win-win, kind of more common approach, as I see it, is based on the assumption that people are motivated primarily by their own interests, as it were. And it's possible to incorporate in that model the idea that, well, each person has an interest in being a nice person. But the assumption in that model is that basically each person has some pretty well-defined interests going in. And so the mediation process is about helping meet those interests, perhaps helping them get some greater clarity about what their interests are, but then also basically meeting those interests or needs that predated the conversation. So the idea behind that interest-based model is that the mediator will help people satisfy their interests or needs, but the interests or needs were really formed actually before the conflict even started. It was people pursuing their need to have a relationship with their kids, or to have a certain amount of money, and so the conflict erupted when the needs competed, and so the job is to kind of separate those needs and see how you can meet each person's. That model doesn't really take into account the interaction, the fact that people's needs can really change in a big way after they've had a good conversation where they realize that the other person on the other side is a fellow human being, and they can really get to both being on board with helping meet something that you might have thought was just the need of one party, but it turns out we humans, who we assume care about our connections with each other, are quite likely to want to actually wish well this person that we're in conflict with. Not in that worst moment, it doesn't seem like we do. Mostly we want to defend ourselves from them, and we don't really care about them at that worst moment. But again, that's what we hate about being in conflict, because we like to be caring people normally, and here we are not being a caring person with respect to this other person. It doesn't feel right to us. So when we help people get back in touch with their caring side, their interests and needs change. And it was based on the connection, the interaction. So I feel like that's in the world of holistic approaches, and I feel like often when people use the word transformative, and particularly in transformative mediation, it's the relational element. It's the assumption that we're all connected. I think that a lot of us have in common, those of us who are trying to do law or trying to improve the way we do law. It's about remaining in touch with the ways in which we're all connected, and trying to manage the aspects of the law which are inherently individualistic and about a competition of rights. And so I think that's the challenge that we as lawyers have, to manage the parts of the legal sensibility which do sometimes, to a certain extent, have some individualism and some competition. And many of us lawyers feel like that's limiting, and we want to acknowledge the ways in which people are bigger than that and connected to each other. The curriculum for training transformative mediators. One part that we feel is very important about learning to do transformative mediation is to really get in touch with what it feels like to be a party in conflict. And so our trainings are lively because we give everybody the chance to be in conflict, as most mediation trainings do. There's role play exercises, but the first exercise we do in the transformative mediation training is have people think back to a conflict that they themselves were genuinely a party to, and reflect on, to the extent that that was a distressing experience, just what was so bad about it. And we find that people report what we call in the transformative lingo a sense of relative weakness and a sense of relative self-absorption. It's a little hard for people to fess up to the self-absorption part of it, but so another way we get at that is ask people, what would you have said about the other party at the worst moment of that conflict? And it's usually some, label of the other person as crazy, selfish, unreasonable, stupid, mean, angry, narcissistic, sociopathic. And so then when we talk about, then another question we ask people is, well, there are a few different approaches we take, but that fundamental experience of being in conflict oneself helps remind us what it's like. And it's characterized by that feeling like, boy, I don't know what to do about this situation. I'm at a loss. I feel like I have no choice but to, whatever it is, but to sue the person, or I feel like I either can sue the person and go after him, or I can just cave in and be a victim. Which is it going to be? People have very kind of oversimplified ideas of what their options are. And so anyway, they aren't feeling as competent and clear and calm about how to take care of themselves. And by the way, they really have no idea where the other person is coming from. So it's this two-part phenomenon of feeling weak and also a feeling like you have no idea where the other person is coming from. So we work with that as being kind of the two basic building blocks of the transformative theory of conflict. We say that that's not only is that a symptom of conflict, but that, in a way, by definition, is what is so hard about conflict for us. In a way, but by our definition, in fact, that's what conflict is. It is the state of being both weak and self-absorbed. So, the question becomes, from that point, okay, let's say we've got some parties who are in that situation. What do we want to do?